Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. I'm Joey Tang, the director of KADIST San Francisco. I acknowledge that we are currently on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Yalamu, the territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. Jota Mombaça's practice entwines drawing and writing, as well as installation, performance, sculpture, sound, and video. The fluid approach flows from their research, which engages the continuing traumas of the transatlantic slave trade and the escalating impact of the climate crisis, traversing topics such as global water transport, displacement, queer mourning, and time travel. Jota Mombaça defines themselves as a non-binary travesti of color, a Latin American slang that has been reappropriated by transfeminist activists and subjects as a local political gender identity. The term reflects the artist's interest in the tensions between desires for opacity and drives towards self-preservation as experienced by radicalized trans artists. The colonialism, gender disobedience, and climate activism are often points of departure for their performative works, which have been exhibited at the 10th Berlin Biennale in 2018, the 32nd and 34th Biennale de Sao Paulo in 2016 and 2020, and the 22nd Sydney Biennial in 2020. Their work, A Gente Combinamos de Não Morrer, it's in the KADIST collection. So this work translates to Us Agreed Not to Die, is a good place to start, and you can learn more about it on our website. The title is a phrase from a short story by Brazilian writer Conceição Evaristo, whose work addresses violence, resilience, and necropolitics through an Afro-diasporic lens. Jota put together this object during a performance in which they made improvised knives with the sharpest shards of glass, tied to ordinary materials such as wood sticks and shoelaces, while amplifying their voice. So Jota uses language, poem in particular, as guides, and their objects hold the memory of the artist's rituals and actions. KADIST advisor Fernando Brunner describes it as, quote, a collective amulet, an autonomous object, carrying within it hordes of violently silenced voices. Which brings us to this exhibition today by Jota, where you have these beautiful, amazing, and poignant works made out of cotton and linen that have been sunken into different bodies of water. You're sitting around Ghost Zero, which have been sunken and submerged in the lagoon in Venice for weeks and pulled out during the performance, where Jota entangled their collaborators alongside their voices and a heavy beat that sounded to me like a heartbeat in search of its own rhythm. It's very poignant and invigorating, like life. In the front gallery where you entered are 3 new commissions produced locally in the San Pablo Bay, San Francisco Bay, and the Pacific Ocean. They were sunken for 3 to 6 weeks in those bodies of waters. And Jota's approach to the exhibition really resonates with the dynamics of water, how it inscribes itself onto materials that are unstable and unfixed, and where artworks are added over the course of a few months, harnessing presence and absence, legibility and illegibility, life and death. Please mark your calendar for December 8th, when Jota will be here in this gallery finally for a performance and a debut of the new video, which will be exactly where we're standing and sitting right now. That will be from 6 to 7:30 on December 8th. Now I want to open the floor and maybe the wave to Darla and Jota, who will talk to us for about 40 minutes, and then 10 minutes for reflections between us and Darla. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say hello, and I'll just put the mic down. I'm not going to speak first, but I'll be coming back in a little while.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes.
It's good.
I wish I could be there with you this evening, but in the absence of my body, I'm happy that to make my voice present. So along with Darla's reflections, I'll be reading some poems that are part of this research. Um, okay. Visa Denied is a poem upside down. It is a poem deranged, in touch with the mud, as in engulfed by its embrace, like every piece of matter shivering silently. The planet's foreigner returns to the scene when a rock slips through the great gap, a throat stuck screaming, a pause. Listen to the message of the tide about those who wait in cushionless benches until the last morning for their predicament to unfold. Will the rocks of Angel Island remember the day of arrivals? Will these roots never find the ground again? The planet's foreigner attends to all muted frequencies as they accumulate in the thresholds of the country. I sleep in cell is turbulent still. The whirlwind static, just witnessing. The ancient mother holding the breath of their child.
So I have written what are the beginnings of some reflections on the poems that we'll hear. So the first poem, Visa Denied, is a poem upside down, is one that I heard. Oh, do I need to pick up here? I have wearing one as well. Okay, so both. I am not a TV person. I am a writer, first of all. And so I want to just let it be known this is nerve-wracking for me to be under the lights, but I am going to begin some reflections that started about a year ago. Yes, okay. I'm gonna keep looking over at Jota and asking if this is the right direction to move in, because we're gonna kind of do this, figure out an improvisational dance together here. So the reflection I wrote to Visa Denied is a poem upside down, starts with, I can jump on a plane anywhere when tickets are purchased for me in advance. So part of what we realized was, as the unfolding of this event was coming into play and the beginning of the exhibition was starting, was that I was in New York. I am in New York. I'm typically in New York. And the rent's going up. The rent is gone up. The rent is too damn high. I have, I got somebody knows reference, good. As the COVID deals went away, so there were a lot of people leaving, fleeing the city, and many of the essential workers who were left in the city or unable to leave were necessary for the city to go on running, were there, and now it seems in the last 6 months, a year, the last year or so, that the returnees, they're back, have now escaped the possibility, or we've now left the possibility of the rent remaining something affordable for those who were considered essential and now no longer are. So my COVID deal rent went up 33%. I was able to negotiate just a little bit. But what we realized in the course of our exchanges, since we met about a year ago, but in the course of our exchanges since this past summer, is that, even if you can get into the country, perhaps if you are allowed the privilege of taking on the role of capital mover, I felt like I was stuck, stuck in my apartment working to make sure I can pay the rent. So all of a sudden we were in this position where borders weren't just in terms of who can get a visa, but also in terms of who can move around in their own space. So I'll just start reading a little bit here. When Jota invited me to continue our conversation, which started at an opening in Berlin, from the Sea Star spaceship we made together about a year ago, I finally read the book my mother gave me some years ago titled People of African Ancestry in Panama, 1501 to 2012. So this is going to take a few different turns. The cosmological map seems to be very much in line with the ways that we've been thinking against the linearity of time from ancient savages to modern cosmopolitans and start to spiral in all kinds of ways. So we met in Berlin. I'm already talking about New York. I'm sitting here in San Francisco. I'm also interested in thinking about ways in which Jota and I come together through our Caribbean ancestry. So all of a sudden, I've put a map full of places out there already, and just will begin to think here about someone named Melva. This is the name of the person on the book, the author of this book, Melva Lowe de Godwin, who happens to be a friend of my mother's and a historian. I've packed this book over so many holiday breaks between moves from schools and countries and continents and writing dissertation in different places and spaces. And only now, because of this very moment, did I turn to opening this book, which has given me such a depth of perspective, not only on my own relationship to the art world, but to my own mother. And I'll just keep dipping in and out of what I've read here. So mountains, molehills, where are you from? The ontological questions dropping like US interventions that made my father laugh at Panama, my mother's home country, in betweenness. Panamanians not made rich by the locks that lock our wealth out from the Amerindians and West Indians and indigenous peoples, the Black peoples, who made the passage possible from the Atlantic to the Pacific. So we're already in the spiral of Black radicality here, which Jota writes about beautifully in a text on Wilhelm Anton Amo, 18th century German, Black, African philosopher. You continue to cut out, I see that you continue to cut out that cutout that seems to cut out the middle between East and West, Pacific, Atlantic, what it is to be West African and Caribbean, West Indian and West African, who sold who to whom to make what. Repair seems like a joke. Just as the oceans roil and roiling over time zones made necessary by wars and farmers and taxes and equity denied. I am a coincidence away from being an immigrant, but then I wouldn't have been at all. I tell myself, for many reasons, that I'm in New York City to live in the spirit of two immigrants meeting there. But then, of course, I wouldn't be me without the space of the incident, New York City immigrant romance, which is the reason so many continue to love the city, but it is not even safe there for immigrants. Yet the vibrance of so many people's coming there continues to bring the clout. The cloud stays on my mind, brimming with the blinking back of tears hotter than servers. So I will go back, put the microphone down for the next poem. Okay, yes. So you have them here also in your chat.
Sinking could be an elevation. Thinking about you in the sand, dry and fluid, the wind blowing, you shape-shifting. Are we these images? Like the smog of a storm, the shore is you, standing peacefully as the city breaks. The tired Imogen and you, the witness, no longer unattended. Too many voices this time. How come? Set the seven winds to face the reconnection, the breeze of possibility. fleeting, unstable, unbearable, like the ocean who becomes a mountain, like the mountain dancing with erosion, the dust unsettled, allegory of displacement. Deserts know better than to reassure naive illusions of belonging. You are lost, and that's detail. Sand will never cease to surround you, as sound within the particles, voices. Claim it wouldn't be possible not to surrender, but defeat without conversion is still a promise. Where would you live if not everywhere?
I have to pick this up again, right? So I actually just wanted to ask a question about this particular passage, because I was going to, don't do things with philosophy, don't do formal things, don't do theoretical things, but then I'm like, I can't help it. So I wanted to ask if you were, and had in mind with the allegory of displacement, I couldn't help but to think of the allegory of the cave, and to think about the shadows that fluctuate around, it seems to fluctuate around bodies that are not supposed to be, or not supposed to be in the places where they are. And to just ask if you were thinking in those like terms of like displacement and shadows alongside mountains and erosion, and where they come together, it seems to me that where they really come together is in the information in the ghosts. So what gets picked up by each of these submerged ghosts also, to my mind, feel in this space like shadows. We get some really nice ones back here if you turn behind you. But if you were, just to speak, we weren't planning this, but because I wanted to ask you some things extemporaneously about, you're like, don't do this to me. Shadows and displacement, and it seems to be an allegory that's happening, the story that you were telling us about the information of bodies and being mountains and erosion, who's being pushed out of the story, perhaps, but is still present in the information that's collected by the ghosts.
Okay, I'll try to answer that. But please let me know if something happens with the call and then we're not following. I'll try. I hope you can follow it. I think it's interesting because this research is all about water and the practice of sinking materials, mostly textiles. But since the beginning, a lot of dry elements started to kind of appear in the process. And they figure out that the elaboration on water, let's say on the elemental presence of it and forms of elemental expression related with water, would necessarily entail some form of perception about dryness and the movement of drying stuff, and also on the non-separability of the elements. So our research of water that would lead to some earthy elements, and then it starts in Venice when I think the Ghost Zero, which you are surrounded by right now. And while I was thinking it, I was just seeing the sublime image of this like huge piece of textile floating in the lagoon. But then in the moment of the performance in which the textile is activated and I'm like pulling it out of the water, it becomes muddy. And then I figured that I'm not only dealing with romantic image of water as fluidity, but I'm also dealing with this very material contradiction, or the complexity of mud as a material that at the same time that has water in it has also earth, dirt, and soon to be dust. So I think that's a moment in which a lot of other political materialities start to come at play in this process for me. It's a moment in which I kind of connect with this very deep sense of connection between what is going on from an environmental perspective and an environmental perspective and the materiality of displacements, erasures, obliteration, social obliteration of human groups across the planet, mostly Black and racialized communities, mostly in what we conventionally call the global south. So I think it's those like earthy elements that have emerged in the process, not separated from water, but in relation to it, as forms of extension to it, that bring out that sense of materiality and or of this other materiality that calls even so when the process starts, there's this like imagination about the sinking ship and the problem of logistics, but then it soon starts to be about migration and the logistics of migration and transportation in that sense. So the figure of the dust as an allegory of displacement also emerged when the ghost come from Venice to my studio and I opened it for the first time. Yeah. And then without expecting it, again, being surprised by the material, I start to unroll it and the dust takes over completely my studio. And I suddenly see myself in this, this like cloud of dust. And I think it's another moment in which this kind of like dry materiality emerged in the process. And for me, what was interesting there was to think about how that dust was transported, how they were kept. It was somehow kept by the water, by the fact that the textile was wet when they first started to move it. And then the dust kind of became a crust. And when I opened it, it then was released in this other country, regardless of like Jesus. Even my intention. It wasn't even something I planned. So for me, something there resonated. But of course, the process of writing poems is never like the process of writing an essay, in the sense that the images emerge more as like as maybe signaling to something than properly elaborating on something. So I think it's always like a proto-elaboration, but at the same time something else that is somehow able to carry a form of presence, a form of sensing in it. So I would say like, that this image kind of comes from that place, yeah.
Thank you. I knew I was going to just like open something up here about non-separability, but it seems like there's still the metaphor that seems to be so too beautiful to capture what is ongoing trauma, what is ongoing and generational. And it seems that you really, I know that we've talked about this, you really struggled to think about how to get out of the metaphorical or even just to try to think non-separability as something that like doesn't just turn into everything's connected to everything and we all connected to each other, because as it turns out, there seems to be some very strong separations that we're perhaps even experiencing right now. The fact that you're not here is not, it's not merely metaphorical. It is actually based on the true histories of violence and modernity that have organized the possibility for who can be where, in which bodies, at which times. And it came, I have a few different places to go here, but it does seem easy sometimes to say that everything's connected to everything and everyone's, it does seem to remove some fallibility, like what went wrong in terms of who can be and which bodies can be where, even if it all is turning to dust. And so one of the places that we started from this is the conversation that started when we first met, so I'm using the notes that you gave when you answered Lauren's question. So I'm just gonna read this part because I think it's important just to clarify a bit. The sinking ship prosperity emerges, this is Jota answering the question. So what is the story behind the exhibition title? What does it mean? The sinking ship prosperity emerges from many places at the same time, but an important story behind it, which is the reason I'm here, is my encounter with Darla Migan in Berlin a year ago when, during a conversation about museums and our role in their undoing and or perpetuation, Darla said something like, and I was very drunk, I'm gonna own it right now. This is what I said. We now own it. Well, of course the ship is sinking, but we are entitled to it. The phrase stuck with me, this is Jota again, the phrase stuck with me as a deeply ingrained, complex acknowledgement of such a predicament, being entitled to the sinking ship. So I'm like, equality, diversity, it sounds so really, really great, but actually those who have been denied a place or recognition for contributions to human culture are immediately entitled, and I mean that in terms of have the deed to the sinking ship. And what could that mean? I mean, theoretically, sure, it sounds great, but it means perhaps something like, is it worthwhile to pursue a career as a curator on a sinking ship? That's a question, right? Perhaps for some of you here. As a figuration of prosperity, the sinking of a ship. So this is, now, Jota, again, is just laughing at me like, okay, go right ahead. I'm like, I am trained as a philosopher, so for me, these questions are meant to not only be provocative for you as makers or guiders of makers, but really, really, like the ship is really, really sinking. Like this city, I've spent 3 days here, it's like a hole in the middle. It's really powerful to be here, to think about sinking ships. So as a figuration of prosperity, the sinking of a ship signals to the material dispossession of the economic regimes which make planetary logistics possible, therefore activating a figuration of prosperity that is not entailed by the success, clearly it's not been successful, right, of modern colonial cycles of reproduction, rather by its interruption and failure. If that's what we are entitled to, following Darla's remark, then ours is the generative dimension of modernity's collapse. Its abyssal regions and watery resilience. So I'm not going to read all of this because it is going to be in the book. I'm probably going to get in trouble for that. But in the meantime, it did bring to mind another poet who also happens to be a painter in response to the sinking could be I wrote so far. So this is the last little bit of response, and maybe we'll go to the next poem now. Okay. So hearing my mother's Caribbean tea in your sinking could be. The shore is you destroys you. Too many voices this time becoming the fleeting, unstable, unbearable. In Sea and Fog, the recently passed Atal Aran, dedicating her words written while living in California to her lover, the philosopher Simone de Weil, writes, she is a book at times. So this is Atal Aran from Sea and Fog. She is a book at times, whispering in our dormant ears fleeting text. Does she have a destiny? If by destiny we mean incurable solitude, we can say that she carries beings, structures in ways that escape our understanding. See and being are accomplices. And I'm reading this and thinking, I don't know if this is Atoll to California, or sorry, I'm going to read one more text, sorry, one more quote from Atoll Adon that goes with this. It says C and from C, and this is from Fog. Quote, writing is an activity that confronts images with the ideas that try to sort them out. But when fires begin to engulf big chunks of California, we turn numb. So that's from the section titled Fog. So this is, I believe, written while she was resident here, like thinking and reading and writing and teaching here, as both an artist and a philosopher. And it strikes me that there are all of these cues that I wasn't expecting to find. I grabbed a bunch of books. I was like, I really want to think about all the different ways elemental possession is around me already. So I was thinking about what's on my shelf that I need to like go deeper into or with. And so as I'm reading Atoll Adon and thinking about Jota and thinking about elemental possession, I kept finding myself like, I can't speak, I can't get it out. I can't get the words into our chat, which was a recording that we had for each other. And then I read this quote from Atoll Adon and it explained to me that writing is an activity that confronts images with the ideas that try to sort them out. However, when fires come up to lick you, right, it's gonna really make it quite difficult to get things out. And so there were these tight corners that are happening, and Joey and I found this one that's happening in the front room, right on the edge. You turn the corner into this larger gallery where it felt like you were having your throat choked in the same way that it feels when tears can't come out. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's why I couldn't get words out, because I am choked by tears when I start to think about the ways that the elements are actively taking themselves back. Earth is repossessing itself right now. There are not enough words for that. There are not enough art exhibitions. There are not, and it is really difficult sometimes when I start to really think about what's happening here. Are we having art exhibitions in the space of what cannot be denied about the elements taking possession back of the earth? How much poetry will there be? In fact, there is now. I'm not going to go here. We can think about it perhaps a little bit later about the call against poetry in the face of Holocaust. But I will turn back to Jota. I'm putting my microphone down.
What is coming for you is only dawn. See, a migrant travels alone at every bus. The question of being pending indefinitely. Trap, tantrum, trauma. The planet's foreigner exits the gate of return as every sunken ship carries its own sense of abandonment. No crying rivers in the water control system. And this is the last time. The metaphysics of the commodity, its enclosure, leaves no space for any equation of value to redeem the shattering of a body into this form. After damage, still, exhaustion sees impossibility. Strange is the voice of the planet's foreigner, always a mishap out of compass, too far from home, from audibility. It is the fifth time wind whispers your name against the water. You, the drowned, the striking beauty of a wreckage, and you, the dweller, grieving time. See, the sunken is no longer tied to its own puzzle, no longer weary. Decomposition is a blast, abolition of progress and order. Holy is the unbecoming of the planet's foreigner, the promising cloth that has sunken deep across the surface of the unknown. They came back saying they had lost the fear of velocity, for sound goes where the migrant drama cannot. Underneath the skin, there are plenty, mysterious bodies of water waiting deep into the earth to the moment. Untimed, the planet's foreigner has no seat in a universe of names and numbers. No moments to mourn or celebrate. Just the baseline, the improper, the under. Frequencies that refuse to be caught. See, in the absence of place, the planet's foreigner exits any sense of geography. Locality is lost. Not here, nor there, stuck in movement, in the tide. Wait till the alarm sounds and try to call them again, screaming against the water. Everybody runs so suddenly, the drive to be saved as their own lost cause. Cars crashing, sinking ships, the rise of empires. Nothing more than than the world ending again. As for the planet's foreigner, the witness, a sound that remains.
Part of me just wants to read this poem again. I know. Can we hear it one more time? Is there time?
Yeah.
Yes. I don't feel like my echo is the right move here. This is perhaps one I would like to just hear in the room again, please.
Okay. What is coming for you is only dawn. See, a migrant travels alone at every bus. The question of being pending indefinitely. Trap, tantrum, trauma. The planet's foreigner exits the gate of return, as every sunken ship carries its own sense of abandonment. No crying rivers in the water control system. And this is the last time. The metaphysics of the commodity, its enclosure, leaves no space for any equation of value to redeem the shattering of a body into this form. After damage, still, exhaustion sees impossibility. Strange is the voice of the planet's foreigner, always a mishap out of compass, too far from home, from audibility. It is the fifth time wind whispers your name against the water. You, the drowned, the striking beauty of a wreckage, and you, the dweller, grieving time. See, the sunken is no longer tied to its own puzzle, no longer weary. Decomposition is a bless, abolition of progress and order. Holy is the unbecoming of the planet's foreigner, the promising cloth that has sunken deep across the surface of the unknown. They came back saying they had lost the fear of velocity, for sound goes where the migrant drama cannot. Underneath the skin, there are plenty mysterious bodies of water waiting deep into the earth to the moment. Untimed, the planet's foreigner has no seat in an universe of names and numbers. No moments to mourn or celebrate. Just the baseline, the improper, the under. Frequencies that refuse to be caught. See, in the absence of place, The planet's foreigner exits any sense of geography. Locality is lost, not here nor there, stuck in movement, in the tide. Wait till the alarm sounds and try to call them again, screaming against the water. Everybody runs so suddenly, they drive to be saved as their own lost cause. Cars crashing, sinking ships, the rise of empires, nothing more than the world ending again. As for the planet's foreigner, the witness, a sound that remains.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing it twice, and we'll keep rereading. But I'm struck here. It sounds like a bit of a pushback, or like I'm trying to figure out, like, when do I get some sense of accounting for the end of the world that has been the end of the world over and over and over again, or does it all get washed away? A sense that there will be no, oh, I'm dropping the mic, I'm like ruining it. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on thinking about, maybe not even reparations, but some sense of accountability for the elemental, or being, let's say, thinking about when some creatures are used as tools or mere elements. And then what comes to mind too is a resonance with the essay on truth and lies in an extra moral sense, which I love to bring up Nietzsche, but fine, why not? Here we are. So it's a text where Nietzsche's thinking about the brief moment of existence that will have been the world, and really uses it to try to talk about a kind of, we call it a mendacious moment, a greedy moment at which we humans think that we were in control, having discovered something called knowledge. And it does seem to resonate with this poem here when we're hearing, I'm thinking with you and thinking about this planet's foreigner that will be the only witness, right, left. Or no witness will be left except for the sound that remains of the earth, right, as it's collapsing. There will be some sound of like a rushing water, or some sound of fire, or some sense of, like, we've maybe seen this in our own homes, right, from just the elements of disaster that we've lived through already.
Yeah, I'm also like breaking protocol a little bit, but the figure of the planet's foreigner that keeps coming in the poems, I always felt them as an entity deeply ingrained in the planet, actually. So it's called planet's foreigner, as if foreigner is a status attributed. And so I was thinking about whales. I was thinking about and whales mostly, actually. But so the figure of the planet's foreigner for me, and it's tricky because the foreigner kind of points out differently. But I think I'm interested in that contradiction. Also, what does it mean to be the foreigner, the stranger, the alien, um, in this sense, in a world or in a planet that is like constrained by a figuration of the world that depend on the continuous exclusion or production of an outside space to be obliterated, to be destroyed, to be extracted from, and to be hindered as a foreigner, as as an entity who does not belong. So I think, and I totally get the question on accountability, but I think there's something about the planet's foreigner, which is a sense of um, I don't know how to say it if I was speaking in Portuguese, I probably would know how to say it, but it's
Say it in Portuguese.
because I don't want. It's not indifference.
Mhm.
It's not that, but it's a sense of. It is as if the scenes are repeating themselves. All those scenes, all actually the reproduction of catastrophe is the very method of modern colonial capitalist uh, word making. So catastrophe is precisely what produces the world as we know it. So there's a sense of no surprise, which is not indifference, but it's a sense of no surprise. And then it becomes kind of central to the poems and to the perspectives. So the poetical perspective that also end up composing the works in the exhibition, I feel. I don't know if I made everything more complicated or if I helped.
Sure, good.
I wasn't.
I hope so, yeah. So what I'm hearing is that there is no outside, right? So it's not to refer to another creature, part of the elements that we are all composed of as an outsider, a foreigner, an alien, is quite strange language as it turns out. We are here together and being in this planet to refer to another part of it as being an outside perhaps would be what's necessary only for the constitution of catastrophe, ongoing catastrophe. What I'm hearing is it should sound, we should be estranged from the language of estranging another. It brings me, then I will just, my last moment here was, because I felt across reading Christina Sharp's In the Wig, like so many places where I'm like, okay, well, you've read this part, like we definitely both read this part, but so many places, but very specifically in a mention of ghosting in a very different sense than perhaps we use it colloquially. Christina Sharp writes in the book In the Wig, Blackness and Being, and she's reporting and responding to a report of a shipwreck in October 2013. Survivors moving attempting to reach the coast of an Italian island. So survivors of that October 2013 shipwreck report, and this could be 2013, 2015, 2022, right? Report that the smuggler, so the captain of the ship, the captain of the yacht, set a fire to attract the attention of the fishermen in the waters and the authorities on shore, and the Italian shore. They report that maritime authorities had the vessel under surveillance, but did not come to the struggling and then burning ship's aid. The report that the fire quickly got out of control and that more than 20 minutes elapsed before any help came. Local yachters said, quote, that they thought they were hearing a gaggle of seagulls rather than human beings on the precipice of death, the refusal to believe and to know, or more so, the desire to misrecognize Black suffering, naturalized as so much wildlife. End of quote. So just the idea that there would be someone or some screaming of human voices that could be collapsed into what is mere wildlife. I would just end there to think about ways in which we can de-estrange ourselves from that which is alien or foreign or outside in the ongoing catastrophe that makes modernity. But that's where I will maybe stop. But do you want to say one last thing? I don't want to be the last one to speak.
Okay, so I'll read one last poem. When I jumped out of my senses, my body was yet afloat. The skin overloaded, each cell having to find a way to repurpose itself as a sensor, a reading infrastructure, never isolated from perception. Too much consciousness to be held by such a vulnerable entity. The inevitability of exhaustion and the radicality of sinking. Nobody could stand the improbable gravity that makes one to fall so slowly in this blurred rhythm in the tired watering. I heard you calling when I was no longer. I heard you screaming and throbbing as if I was becoming a corpse and not water. Although no amount of words can articulate that properly, water will, in its undoing, hide some words and codes and sounds in its inconstancy. Water will always contain the undone qualities of the sunken, their diluted memory. Water will, not on purpose. No, this is not another tale of repetition, another stupid dance. The intensity of this gesture is calling for a ritual without choreography. Drowning is not a poem, but it's not a poem either. Impossible to undo a distance once it's set. No amount of time spent with goodbyes can make up to the hours lost. So many things unsaid, but that is never the point. The final instant is always shorter than it should. The last breath before breathlessness, and then life continues regardless. Matter transforms in spite of your attempt to withhold the fatality of a nevermore within that instant. That means I was wrong from the very beginning, for when I jumped out of my senses, my body was yet afloat. Not the mother at that gate, either paralyzed or collapsed, waiting. Not the child's trauma, reenacted and once again unwritten, growing. Maybe the distance set is as illusory as disfigurations. Life continues as rivers run. Crying is other than human. Elemental possession. Thank you.
I'm sure you want to sleep now. How do you feel?
Yeah, it's a bit sleepy.
Okay.
3 a.m.
It is 3 a.m. in this room, yeah. I will talk to you soon.
So,
Good night.
thank you.